97.3 ESPN.com. Eagles and NFL Insider John McMullen joins us now, as he does every day at this time, to look at the NFL. We got a lot to dive into. Yesterday or the other day, I guess it was, I don't know what day it was, but we talked about different guys that could stay, go. Donnie Jones, we mentioned him because of the cap savings here. And today it was announced, John, that Donnie Jones has retired, saving the Eagles a little bit of money.
Yeah, a little bit of a surprise because Donnie's still performing at a pretty high level. But we mentioned the same thing with Brent Selleck. I mean, when you've been around as long as Donnie's been around even longer, sometimes you decide it's better to go out on top. And that's, I think, ultimately where he came down and said you can't put the period on the sentence any better than it is right now, and he decided to walk away. And obviously that's going to affect the Eagles because, you know, let's face it, punter is one of those positions you don't think about unless you're Pete Thompson, maybe, obsessed with the kicking game. But you only really notice it when guys are making mistakes. And Donnie was just so consistent. You rarely noticed him, maybe except when he was forgetting to take his sweatpants on when he jogged on the field. But he was so consistent. It's a big loss. It really is. He was a very good punter for a very long time.
Yeah, I thought you might be going to those pants there, John. What's the effect of this move then, by the way? Do they have another guy in the organization? Do they have to go out and find a guy? What's the corresponding effect then if they have to go find a guy they like?
Well, they did re-sign Cameron Johnston, who was with the team last year in the offseason and through training camp. Remember, Donnie was one of those guys who stayed away from the voluntary work as a longtime veteran, preferred to spend some time with his family. So, in essence, the entire offseason was Cameron Johnston's. And he was a typical young punter. He's got a big leg, but he was very inconsistent from day to day. And I think that's the biggest thing with punters is you need that consistency. And we'll see. I find it hard to believe they're just going to hand him the job. I think ultimately they'll bring in some competition. But they do like him. There's no question about that. And he'll obviously have a leg up, no pun intended, on anybody they do bring in. But I would imagine they want to push him at least a little bit.
Yeah, John, I mean, obviously we don't talk a whole heck of a lot about the kickers and the punters, but just kind of put in perspective for people how the job Jones did, too, kind of changes a lot, you know, when we talk about field position and, you know, changing that whole aspect of the game that I don't think that, you know, during the course of a season we don't really get into all that much.
Yeah, it's very important. Anytime you can flip the field and have a guy who is so good at situational punting, and that's what you have with a veteran who's done it for so long. If you look at all the franchise records Donnie set while he was here, one of them was punts inside the 20, and that kind of tells you as far as directional kicking, as far as pinning teams back. And obviously, if you're making the opposing offense have to drive 90 yards, that's a heck of a lot better than 50 or 60. It becomes more difficult. And it's one of those sort of hidden things in the game we don't always talk about because we're so obsessed with offense and defense. But special teams has been a big part of the success of the Eagles when they have been successful. And we've always talked about Dave Phipps' units since Dave has been here and how effective they've been, the Eagles as a whole. And part of that, a lot of that, had to do with the fact that Donnie Jones was so consistent as a punter.
So Donnie Jones gets to go out on top, Super Bowl champion. Now, what does this mean savings-wise for the Eagles, John?
Well, you know, anything helps with the Eagles. As we said, when the new league year starts on March 14th, right now they're projected to be $9.4 million over the cap. So they have to do a lot of maneuvering Donnie was set to count $1.875 million against the cap, which is a lot for a punter. Cameron Johnston, for instance, would be down at $480,000. So it's not like a quarterback. It's not like Matthew Stafford or Derek Carr making $25 million, but it's one of those little moves that can help you as far as the salary cap goes, because you pick up a little bit over $1 million, and every little bit helps when you're over the projected salary cap.
John McMullen with us here talking Eagles offseason news as the Eagles continue to ride that glow from the Super Bowl victory, but Donnie Jones decides to go out on top. Do you think the Eagles were caught by surprise by this, John? Do you think they're happy with this decision a little bit in a way because it helps them out, save some money?
I don't think either. I don't think they were surprised. As Mike mentioned, we did kind of hint this could be one of the possible scenarios just because of Donnie's age, the fact that he has shown in the past that he wants to spend time with his family. He's been doing it for so long, and as I said, there's no better ending to the storybook than winning the Super Bowl. So from that standpoint, you kind of knew he was at least going to think about it. The Eagles were certainly aware of that. And as I said, from the cap savings, a lot of it depends on how Cameron Johnston develops. As I said, I know the Eagles like his potential. And if he turns out to be a top-tier punter early in his career, sure, they'll like the little bit of savings. But it's hard to imagine a guy like that who's never punted in an NFL game being anywhere near as effective as Donnie Jones, at least early in his career.
Yeah, and obviously Donnie Jones is a guy that you take for granted sometimes.
I mean,
He's been here for a while.
Too. I mean, he was the holder, John. I mean, that affects then the extra points, the kickoff or the field goals.
Yeah, sure. That's another one of those understated things nobody ever thinks about. And when we talked about John Dorenbos moving on and moving to Rick Lovato as the long snapper, and then you talk about the holder and the fact that if you remember at the end of training camp, there are a lot of people predicting that Cameron Johnson would make this team last year for the savings and the fact that he spent the entire offseason as the holder and things like that enter into the equation. But it is big, and the fact that nobody thinks about it until something goes wrong. And if you think about since Donnie's been here, how many bad holds you've seen? It's not many. So it's hard to improve on what he was able to do.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com, is with us here at JF McMullen on Twitter. I found this story to be funny because the committee that going over all these rules, they're trying to figure out what a catch is and what's not a catch. The committee says the 2014 Dez Bryant play should have been a catch, to which most Cowboy fans, right? It's a catch. Mostly every one of these plays that they've overturned are catches. I mean, are we now figuring out that they've made all these mistakes?
Yeah, we have. And it's happened before in the NFL, and it usually happens after a high-profile play, and that was probably, if not the crux of it, to Dez Bryant, because that was in a playoff game, and that was such an important part of that game. The Cowboys win that game, essentially, if that's ruled a catch. It really goes back to the Calvin Johnson play before that, which was also a catch that was overruled. This league has always had a very, very difficult time admitting mistakes when they decide games. And they sort of go on and try to hide it, for lack of a better word, and then when it gets far enough in the rearview mirror, then maybe they'll address it. And I think that's what's happening here. But yeah, we always make the joke about the bar test, and if there's 100 drunks in the bar that say it's a catch, it's probably a catch. And everybody said Dez's was a catch, Calvin's was a catch, so many catches we've seen since that time. The average fan thinks it's a catch, but the league was still trying to really kind of stand behind these high-profile plays And it was a mistake, and it was over-legislating the game, and I think it hurt the game.
Where did the whole catch thing change to where they scrutinized it so much, to where we all knew what catches were, and then it got so spiraled out of control?
Well, I think it was that Calvin Johnson play. If you think about that play, I think that's where it started, and then it ramped up on the Des Bryant play. Because that was a Cowboys-Packers postseason game that essentially turned the game from the Cowboys to the Packers. And if you go back to the Tuck rule, really, and Tom Brady and the Oakland Raiders, that was another example of it. When they don't want to admit a call decides a football game. Unfortunately, this league has a long history of that. And those particular plays, Calvin Johnson, Des Bryant, those are where it started. And instead of just, sort of taking your medicine and saying, yeah, this is probably a bad mistake, and unfortunately it cost the Cowboys a playoff game, instead of just saying that, they instead doubled down and made all these bad calls over corresponding years because of it.
Because not only did the NFL competition committee say that the Des Bryant catch should have been a catch, they're also saying that the Calvin Johnson catch should have been. And it's unanimous agreement. Unanimous agreement. Everybody fell. I mean, that's a terrible look for the league.
And by the way, Eagles fans are lucky because they already changed this for the Super Bowl. They already changed it early. They didn't do it officially, but they changed it early because of calls earlier in the season, and they weren't going to do that in the Super Bowl. And there were a couple of examples, Corey Clement being the most notable. That play, that particular type of catch, was overturned more than once in the regular season by Al Riveron, and they essentially said, we're not going to do that for the Super Bowl. So the Eagles got a bit of a break in the fact that they wanted to change this, and they sort of did it unofficially before Super Bowl 52.
Yeah.
Good break.
Did you see the Showtime Inside the NFL where the officials are talking about the Corey Clement catch, and they're saying total control there? I was pretty surprised to hear that audio.
Yeah, I think they were made aware of it, and the fact that they were shown. If you think about, there was a high-profile play with the Jets that overturned a touchdown, which was a similar instance where there's just a slight bobble, and they overturned it. And there are a couple other examples. The Pittsburgh example was more aligned with the Zach Ertz catch. But there were a number of those plays throughout the year that were overturned that shouldn't have been overturned. And the league got into a lot of issues with it, a lot of criticism. And as I said, it was pretty clear they told Gene Steratore before the game, we're going to go back to the old standards, which was essentially you don't overturn anything that is not completely obvious. For some reason, they got away from that, and they shifted back in that direction. I think that's, by the way, the proper thing to do.
So to be clear, the report is that the competition committee is considering removing the going to the ground portion of the catch rule. Situations like that, John, seem to be the one that most teams and fans have a lot of issues with. So removing that would be a big step from them to simply saying this is a catch regardless of what happens on your way to the ground.
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious, the standard. The problem is putting it down on paper, really, in black and white, to make it make sense, because I think we all know logically and from a common sense standpoint, if we watch a play and if a receiver makes a circuit catch, gets 2 feet down, total control, and then at the very, very end when he hits the ground, the ball pops out. That is not a catch under the current rule. And I think they want to change that, and I think that's the proper thing to do.
All right, some other reports from the competition committee, which they will look into the targeting rule, change defense. This is interesting. I heard an oof there. Changing defensive pass interference from a spot foul to a 15-yard penalty. I'm a fan of that. And stricter enforcement of illegal contact. I don't know that I would be a fan of that.
I don't know. I don't know if you can get any stricter on that last one.
Okay.
That'll just make more flags. I don't like that.
The targeting rule. Let's go to the targeting rule. You gave an oof.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because both of those rules, the first two you mentioned, are college rules. And the targeting rule at the college level has been a disaster. And the last thing I wanted to do is copy that. On the other hand, the 15-yard rule at the college level, I do like. And you know, people have argued in the past, well, you know, what if you're a cornerback and you're beaten badly and you're just tackling the guy to prevent a touchdown? Well, maybe you can put in sort of a caveat, and if something is so blatantly obvious,
like an NBA clear path.
Exactly, and make that a spot foul. But I've been advocating the 15-yard rule for years and years and years because too many of these ticky-tack pass interference calls down the field are deciding football games. And I always say you don't want the guys in the stripes deciding football games. You want the players doing it. And 15 yards would be a lot more palatable than 55 just because you threw the ball up and it's a 50-50 ball. And an official made a bad call or at least a questionable call. I think 15 yards is a better way to go about it. But while I say that, I don't think that has a chance, and you know what, of passing.
Really?
Yeah. There's no way they're going to overturn that.
Oh, I hate that rule.
I agree. I don't like it. I've been writing about that for well over a decade. I think it's long overdue. And unfortunately, because of the safety concerns, I do think at some point, whether it's this year or very closely down the road, they are going to implement some kind of targeting rule. I just hope it's better done than the college level because, as I said, they do a really, really poor job of that at the college level.
Now, John, since we're talking league news and reports that are out there, how about the report that says that the NFL is going to allow coaching hires before the teams are done in the playoffs? We all know what took place in Indianapolis, and Frank Reich ended up there, but do you think that gets support and passes?
Yeah, I do, and I think essentially that's going to be the Josh McDaniels rule, and that's been one of those common sense rules that for some reason they should have implemented years and years ago, and they hesitated. I don't understand this mentality that you can't be a coordinator like Frank Reich or somebody of that nature making a run towards the Super Bowl, and you can't go on interviews and take another job and still be a professional and finish your current job. We've all done that. You give your 2 weeks notice, and it's not like you stop working, because if you do, you're not going to be much of a professional. No one's going to want to hire you. I've never understood. You just kind of put the coaches who do make Super Bowl runs or long runs in the playoffs behind the eight ball because sometimes people aren't willing to wait. And then the second part is that you're assuming people are going to be unprofessional, not doing their job, when we all know that's not the case. So that's just common sense, and it should have been done years and years ago.
John McMullen, everybody, here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, 97.3 ESPN.com. You can check out all of his Eagles and NFL offseason news and columns at JF McMullen on Twitter every day right here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. All right, John, we'll have to get into that college football conversation on tomorrow's show.
All right, guys. Thank you.